thank you so much indeed for being here this evening. I think I know pretty well everybody here, but if you don't know me, my name's Alistair Green. I'm one of the trustees of Albourne Recreation Centre, or as we call it, ARC. And I'm going to be giving a short presentation this evening, and then we're going to have your questions as well throughout at the end. Just so you're aware, we are recording this. We had quite a lot of people saying, especially as you can imagine, young families who weren't able to make it. So what we're doing is we are recording this, and just the presentation part, which will be from the back. No one's faces will be seen. It'll be just from the back. And the reason we're doing it is A, so that people who can't make it can then watch it online afterwards. And then secondly, it's, as you'll find out later on, it really helps with our funding down the road when we can prove the level of consultation that we've gone through. So it'll be just recorded from the back. When we get to the end of the presentation, we will stop filming. So we will not be filming or recording any of the questions or anything after that. So is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So this evening, what we're going to do is have probably about 20 minutes or so, maybe half an hour, depending on how long it takes, to go through a presentation to give you an idea of the whole picture. If it's okay with you, we won't take any questions during the presentation. Firstly, so that people watching it afterwards, it'll make complete sense to them. And secondly, there's a very good chance that we might answer your questions a little bit later on. So just a bit of background of why we're here this evening. A group of people who are very closely involved with ARC, the trustees, we were reflecting the other day about how we got to this point. And those of you, oh, by the way, sorry, I suddenly realised we should do a bit of housekeeping first, shouldn't we? First of all, I'm not expecting any fire alarms or fire things or anything like that, but if there is any reason that we have to evacuate, there's a door at the back, a door at the front, and a door over here doing my airline pilot bit. Was that okay? Was that right? Okay. Also, there are no COVID regulations regarding the hall. We have deliberately spaced out the chairs a little bit for everybody. Feel free to be as comfortable as you want, and there is no reason why anybody should wear a face mask, but absolutely please feel free to wear one if you're more comfortable, but that is entirely a personal choice. So there are hand sanitizers, so later on, when we come to questions, if you don't mind, we won't pass the microphone around. I'm sure you'll agree that's probably not the best thing to be doing at the moment, but there are hand sanitizers around the room and outside we would encourage you to use as well. So we were looking at ARC and we were looking at Albourne, and we realised that Albourne is a phenomenal village. We have so much in this village. When you look at all of the great success, I'm sure most of you will have seen the Penelope Keith programme all about villages in England. And when they came to Albourne, I think her quote, she said, in a time when villages are struggling to survive, there's one village in Wiltshire that's actually thriving, and that's Albourne, which was a great accolade to our village. And there's so many great things about the village, but the one thing that we do not have at the moment are any decent sports facilities. In fact, we have no sports facilities in this village and haven't had for quite some time. And there's definitely demand, as you'll find later on, there's definitely demand for sport in the village because we know the amount of people who are driving their children to Hungerford, to Ramsbury, to Marlborough and even Swindon. So we know that there are young people in the village who want sport, and the reason that ARC exists is because it is our mission to provide sport and recreation facilities for the entire village, by the village, for every individual in the village, regardless of their ability, regardless of their age. And that really is our mission. And we have put together a plan. We've been talking to people for a number of years, as you will be aware. And we have been talking to groups, we've been talking to organisations, and we've also been talking to other facilities that are running something, not exactly the same, but something similar to what we are proposing. Tonight is a result of all of that feedback. What we should say is this is not a fait accompli. This is purely all the information we've gathered so far, and this is the best that we have come up with so far that we feel most suits all of the feedback and all the requirements that people have in the village that we've heard of. So as a result of this consultation, we will go away and refine all of those findings to then produce something early next year, which will then take into account this level of consultation. Before I go into any more details about what we're proposing, I'd like to introduce the chairman of ARC, Malcolm Price, to give a bit of a background and also to introduce you to the ARC team. And he even gets his own play on music, which is fantastic.
Thanks, sir. Hi, my name's Malcolm Price. I was thinking about tonight, yesterday night, thinking, what's my role as chairman here tonight? I think I've got to thank everybody that's been involved actively in consulting people in the village on a one-to-one basis, individual groups, and I thought, well, actually, I'll try and write down all the names of people that have contributed in an active way over the last few years to try to establish what the village needs. And I started writing down the names and I learned something. I came up with a figure of 77 people in the village, by name, that have contributed to the consultation. Thanks. The consultation. And so there's 22 active volunteers that have actively been involved in things like community consultation, drop-ins, infrastructure services, looking at that, how a pavilion or whatever would come into the services, drawing plans at various stages during the consultation for discussion. Eventually we managed to put that all together and come up with an overall site plan, which you'll see today. Team got together and installed a pole gate at Southern Lane Field, so you could actually walk into the field. There's been a quite substantial amount of fundraising which individuals have carried out. We've been visiting other sports and recreation centres. Huge amount of thought has gone into the budget, both for the build and outgoings and income. So we have put financials together, which Chris has been an enormous help. I'm not going to name everybody, of course, that's been involved in this project so far, but I did learn something last night. I would never have guessed before I started writing down names that it was 77 people that have been involved in this project in one way or another. We've been meeting with various coaches and children's activity groups such as summer camps, I think they're called activity camps. A lot of effort's been gone into landscaping design for both the car park, the proposed access track and the pavilion buildings, etc. And in particular, the perimeter track and its wilding areas and parkour exercise points around the perimeter track. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the scale of commitments by people to give up their free time to try and find out, establish what the village needs in sports, in terms of sports and recreation, and what is feasible and what is sustainable going forward. With that, I'll just say, look, tonight is, as Alistair said, tonight is all about you telling us what you think, your thoughts before we consider going to planning application. So we really do want to hear from you tonight. I'd like you to think of a couple of things, hold a couple of things in your head whilst Alistair is presenting. That is, I'd like you to sort of just recognise the number of people that have contributed to this project so far and the level of commitment, but also a picture of a sort of typical day in the life of a sports and recreation hub at Palmer's Field, with things like, I don't know, in the multi-use games area, basketball going on, dog walkers using the perimeter track and perhaps meeting outside the pavilion, junior and youth band rehearsal going on at the same time, five-a-side football again on the multi-use games area, table tennis perhaps going on. You know, we are talking about a multi-use facility that is going to be flexible, both in terms of its utility and its income base. Okay, well, with that, I will leave it to the rest of you, Alistair, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. Also, just to introduce the team, some of whom are here, some of whom aren't unfortunately able to be here this evening. First of all is Richard Englefield, who some of you might remember led the last time that there was a public consultation when the parish council were giving the lease or giving the lease to ARC some years ago. That was led by Richard. He has done a huge amount of work when it comes to sport. We have Mike Rodd, who many of you will know. If you wouldn't mind standing quickly, Mike. Mike has a huge amount of expertise when it comes to fundraising, and we'll hear from him a little bit later on. We also have Peter Vangeli and also Malcolm, who both have an amazing background in project management to get us to this far, and also Chris Davies, who is our treasurer, who's done a huge amount of work with the financials. So let's move on and tell you a little bit about the plan for Palmersfield. First of all, just to let you know what's where. Palmersfield is the bit at the bottom. That's the bit where we have the lease for. ARC was given this lease by the parish council in July 2019. They also granted a lease for the bottom part of Southard Field as well. So that's the top field. That's what many people recognise as the existing playing field. To give you an idea, that's the bit we have the lease on, and then that bit there as well. Just to let you know that the parking and access track, the entrance is from Farm Lane, which you can see up on the top right as you're looking at the screen. We already have planning permission for that track. That's part of our 30-year lease with the parish council, and we already have planning permission to have car parking and also to have that access track. No vehicles will be allowed on Palmersfield. Again, it's part of the covenant that was set for the field, apart from dropping off people, disabled individuals and so on. But no actual parking will be taking place on that part of the field. The field, for those of you, I'm sure you read the leaflet that we dropped through to every household, the field was granted to the village for sport and recreation facilities by the Palmer family. So ARC's mission is to make sure that we deliver upon that, which is why we were given the lease by the parish council in the first place. So looking at the access track, if you see that's Farm Lane on the top, that's the parking area, and you'll notice that there's a gate, which I'll just point to just over here, and that gate is where the parking stops. It's just access from that point onwards in terms of anybody who has to get actually physically in the field. But otherwise, there would be no further things. So in front of those bungalows, for example, there would be no parking in front of there. It's all tucked in at the other area, and that's for 26 cars. Looking at the actual field itself, this is our provisional plan. The reason it's taken us a long time to get to this point is to work out what could squeeze into where. How would it all work together? What is going to work for the multiple uses for which we want to use the field? So we start off with a football pitch. Again, we've been working very closely with the Football Association to make sure that we have a size that matches and meets the requirements of the FA. The reason this is important, not only does it mean that Albourne can then be part of a village league, although initially we have already come to an agreement with Ramsbury Football Club that we will be affiliating with them in the first stages, but to enable us to be able to even host a village league, believe it or not, according to the Football Association regulations, it has to be of this size, which actually is bigger than the area marked out on Sutherfield. Things have changed a lot over the last 10, 15, 20 years. This is the requirement for 2021 if we want to provide sport. And Richard Englefield and some of the team have done a huge amount of work to make sure that we completely comply. Not only does it mean we'll be able to play football there in a village league, but also we have a chance of funding as well. And the FA have been talking to us to make sure that everything that we're providing meets their very, very strict criteria. So we also have, in our research, there was a huge demand for football, but not much demand for rugby. That's at this stage. We know things will change and can change, so we've actually designed it so that we can play rugby on the same pitch, so it will be marked out for both. But initially, our research says that there's actually only interest for football. But again, we want to try and be as flexible as possible for future plans because we know how things change, especially once you've established something there. We also then have the Mugger Court, the multi-use games area. This is something we really only discovered in the research that we were doing. Initially, we were looking at a football field and a rugby field, and I think that was the plans you might have seen many years ago. But there was a huge demand for one of these multi-use games areas, and Malcolm outlined earlier on where it'll be in 2 sections. You can play five-a-side football, you can do basketball, you can play hockey, you can use them as cricket nets. There's a multitude of things you can do. There's also a multitude of surfaces as well that we can do, and we've done a huge amount of work with suppliers to find out A, the costings of them, and B, what is the type of surface that's most suitable. For anybody who ever goes to Ramsbury, this is actually double the size of the Mugger Court that they have in Ramsbury. The reason for that is twofold. One, we're now providing something very different to Ramsbury, who have already expressed a huge amount of interest in using this. But secondly, it's also the type of surface that we will have is a lot more flexible than the one that they have at Ramsbury. That will be sunk into the ground. There's obviously a huge amount of groundworks, so actually the back of the Mugger Court, the fencing, will actually be almost at the top of where the field is. So it'll actually be sunk down in, so that anybody looking from the houses behind actually will be overlooking the Mugger Court. They won't actually be looking into it. And obviously, if anybody's got any questions about any of this later, then please do ask. The perimeter track, very similar to what we have at the moment. Absolutely, dog walkers will be welcome. We know there's 1 or 2 people who are very concerned about that. There are signs on the Southern Lane field saying no dogs. Those are signs from way back, I think in the 60s or something. They're no longer valid, and certainly nothing to do with ARC, and we certainly will not be restricting dogs or stopping dogs coming on the field. That's definitely not our intention. What we do want to do is set up a working group with dog walkers and owners in the village to work out how we can work together to provide something that's suitable for dogs, but will also work within the remit of what we have. We're also working with the carbon neutral group in Auburn to make sure that we've got some wilding. You'll see there's lots of areas along the brook, for example, or Bourne, whichever camp you belong to, and we're looking at having as much wilding areas there as we possibly can. A lot of people in our survey were asking, don't get rid of the zip wire. So the zip wire is staying. That's definitely going to be there. People have found it very, very popular, so we've managed to squeeze that in so that remains exactly as it is. The pavilion building. This is probably the most ambitious part of our project without question. It is expensive. That's, unfortunately, buildings cost a lot of money these days. And we also have to get services to the field, and there's a lot of work to do. But we also wanted to make this a multi-use facility. And the reason for that was, A, we wanted to provide more than just basic sports of football. We also wanted to provide many other sports and other recreation. And also, we're speaking to funders, and Mike Rogg will tell us a little bit more about this later, but actually the funders love the fact that this is going to be a multi-use facility. They're very, very keen on that. So this is our proposed building, which you've seen on the leaflet. It's something that is designed primarily to fit in with the area. You'll see the solar panels on the roof. We can actually make this a carbon neutral building to operate. We're looking at potentially putting a sedum roof on the back and making it as eco-friendly as possible. But the good news is that all of the people we've spoken to so far have said that actually making an eco-carbon neutral building is exactly the same cost as making a standard construction building without those same credentials. The other thing you'll notice about the building as well is its shape. That has been designed because of the acoustics. We'll talk a moment about the different elements to it, but obviously we want to make sure that we're not creating too much noise for anybody outside, but also for users within the building as well. So let's have a look inside the building. That's the one on the left-hand side. That's what you would see as you come into Palmer's Field. So the door there would be an access door to people using certain elements of the building. And then the front of the building, which you can see on the previous slide, was where you will have the main doors for the general public to go into if there are events and activities. But as you can see, it's a good contemporary building, an exciting building. And we've also been in discussion with different builders. We engaged an architect initially to come up with a design, And then through research, we found that actually modular buildings are a lot better value to build. They allow us flexibility to expand if we want to later on, so there is space to expand the building, but also a design like this means there's less disruption for everyone around. Basically, they build this in a factory, and then it all comes on the back of trucks, and they build it literally within weeks. It's an incredibly efficient way of building, and it's a lot cheaper way of building. So nothing has been decided, but we are certainly very much in favour of that kind of design. Looking at the footprint inside, we have designed it to be multi-purpose. We've also designed it so that we can have events happening at the same time with safeguarding very much in mind. We recognise a huge proportion of users of this building will be younger people. So every area, every zone has its own toilet facilities so that, for example, if there's a party happening in the arts room or there's a junior band playing in the music room, they would have access to their own toilets without having to worry about going into public areas. Likewise, the changing rooms at the top. The changing rooms are, again, they're FA approved. In fact, we found out fairly recently that the FA have now changed the rules again to say that you actually need a treatment room as part of the facilities to be A, get funding, and B, to be part of the Village League. Fortunately, the officials' rooms that we've got there, they can double up. So fortunately, what we have there is completely compliant. Let's go through the areas individually. The first area is the changing room. This is without question the most expensive part to build. Square foot wise, costs a lot more because you have the showers, you have changing rooms, and all of that space is a lot more expensive. According to the research we've done, we'll be able to have showers running off ground source heat pumps and then topping up with the solar panels. So there's no need to have gas or anything else like that coming to the field, which will save us a lot and also is future-proofing the building as well. Then we move to this, which is the social area, which will be open for limited times, mainly when the building is used. And we're seeing this social area as a support for activities in the building. Yes, we are going to have a small cafe in there, which will serve basic refreshments, but that will be just purely while other events are taking place in there. It's also a good potential income for us as well. Obviously, if there are events during the day, we will open during the day, but normally we only envisage this being open for a few hours in the evening. One of the things that you may or may not be aware of, part of our lease, is that we make no noise after 10 o'clock at night, and that's obviously something that we will honour, so nothing can go on past 10 o'clock at night, so we don't disturb anybody locally. Then we move to the arts room. We've called it the arts room because, again, for funding, calling it arts, it sounds good. They really like the sound of that. But the reality is anything could take place in here. For example, I've already been approached by somebody who wants to start a table tennis club in Auburn. People might want to do other sorts of clubs in the village. So again, that room can be used for that. You'll see that there's dividing doors between the sections so that we get we have multiple abilities to use it in many different ways as we see fit and according to what the demand is. Then we move to the music room. Some of you may be aware that Auburn Band expressed an interest to be a part of this project. We have worked very closely with them to find out what they wanted, and we've designed a space according to what they were looking for, including storage that they can use as well. Auburn Band have committed, we've come up with a 4-stage process for the band, which I won't go into the full details with you at this stage, but they commit to each stage that they want to be a part of. They've committed to stage 1. Stage 2 will be when we go for planning permission in the spring of next year, and at that point we'll be looking to them to see if they wish to commit to the next stage. So at the moment they are very much part of the project. If they decide not to proceed in February or March, whenever it is, then obviously we will redesign accordingly. So that's the area. I just want to give you a bit of a picture of what could be happening in this, say for example, on an evening like tonight. So you could have, for example, the junior band playing in the music room. You could have an event like a dance class or something like that happening, or a private party happening in the arts room. The social area will be open, where dog walkers and anybody just walking around can go in, have a quick coffee, have a light refreshment. And one of the things that we want to do is to encourage what we call cross-pollination. nothing to do with plants. It's just that people get an opportunity to see other things that are happening in the village. They might see the tennis club taking place. They might see people going up on the Mugger Court, seeing five-a-side football up there. They get an opportunity to talk with each other and find out, and we see this as an opportunity for each club to grow in their membership because they have that ability to cross-pollinate. Then on a typical Saturday, for example, the football field will be in use. We'll have an opportunity to anybody who's there. If you go to play football, for example, at Ramsbury at the moment, they'll serve bacon sandwiches and things like that at half time. An opportunity for us to help pay for everything, but also it's a great facility for them to be able to have. So let's talk about the cost. Yes, that is a huge amount of money. We recognise that. It is something that most of us and most of you probably will be slightly surprised at, but it is what things cost today. That's what they are. If you wanted to build the building that Ramsbury have as their football club at the moment, their clubhouse, which is just changing rooms and a small lobby, that would cost in the region of £1 million to build today. It's just what things cost. The good news is that the funders we've spoken to, and I will pass over to Mike shortly, the funders have been very, very positive about our figures and our projections. And you're probably wondering, so how are we going to pay for it all? This is our initial idea for funding. So grant providers will fund the vast majority of this, and then we will have donations in kind, but also private donations, any other form of donations, fundraising activities, and so on. Just to give you an idea of how practical this actually is, because it might look at the moment to be just a huge figure. I just want to pass over to Mike, if I may, because Mike will give you an idea of some of the conversations we're having with grant funders and the kind of feedback that we're getting from them. Obviously, Mike will be available to answer questions later, but just to give you a brief overview of those conversations, Mike, can I pass over to you?
Right, just briefly. Some of you will know that I've just recently been involved in a major project at Crofton, and for that project we had to raise over £1 million. It gave me access and information to the National Lottery Fund, and that's the first place that I went to see what the lottery fund, this is a lottery community fund, what their interest would be. And we had a very, very good session with them literally a couple of months ago. They made it very clear, first of all, that because of the multi-use, they're very keen on it. Because they don't want to just fund another football field. They don't want to just fund one thing. They like the fact that there's various organisations involved. But there's two other important criteria. One is that there's got to be a long-term sustainability program. That is absolutely key. And I mean, for the other work I've done with the lottery fund, they put you right through the grill for that. They want to know, is this going to be around 30 years from now? And I can tell you why. And that's because some of you know a pub that they funded the restoration of at Honey Street and spent £2 million on it, went bottom up within a couple of months because the funding was not there in terms of the long-term future. The other thing they want to know is the community totally supportive of this? And they will want to know that we've had meetings like this, that there is support, not just from the parish council, but from the rest of the community, because these are community funds. But they would, on that basis there, they saw no problems about funding this to quite a substantial amount. From that, once you've got that, that leads you to other funders. Because so many other funders, we had this at Crofton, once we had the lottery fund, the rest of the funding was actually very easy. Because there's a lot of funds out there that once you've got lottery fund, they're behind you. Because all the due diligence has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. So talking of sustainability, let's have a look at the running costs. And again, these are projections. We can't obviously be entirely accurate, but these are running costs based on a model that we've created showing a certain level of usage. Not full usage by any stretch of the imagination, but usage that we think is actually sustainable and viable. The reason we split it between fixed and variable costs is because we are very, very aware, should a COVID situation happen again, that we need to make sure that we have a sustainable model that we can rely upon. So we would raise the funds through sports income, pavilion income, and then other sources, including fundraising activities as well. So that's a projection of what we think is possible. So, the impact on the rest of the village. As Mike said, we absolutely need this to be a project that the village supports. We hope that in all of the feedback we've had so far and the feedback we get going on, that this will be something that the village will see is a great facility for the village of Albourne, that for last we will have a sporting hub for this village. And people won't have to drive to villages all over the place. People will be able to walk and cycle. People who, for example, someone was telling me yesterday that their son goes to Hungerford at the moment and doesn't really know the kids very well in Albourne because they never get to play sport with them because they had to go outside the village. In fact, half the coaches that actually coach the youngsters in Ramsbury come from Albourne. Many of the people who are playing in Ramsbury come from Albourne. So we hope that people will see that this is not just a benefit for the young people of this village, but actually a benefit for everybody. But of course that will depend on the feedback that we get. We recognise that you can't build something brand new, you can't do something like this without it having an impact. So we have looked long and hard, and we've engaged with as many groups and as many people as possible to look at that impact. The first bit of impact that we're very aware of is this, the Memorial Hall. Firstly, obviously, with the band, if they come to Palmersfield to join ARC, that will impact this hall. We recognise that, and we will work in whichever way we can to help the Memorial Hall to mitigate any changes that that actually causes. Likewise, any other events that we hold in that building, we have created a policy where we will always be more expensive than the hall. So the hall will always be the default place for anybody to go in the village because it will be cheaper, it's in the centre of the village, and it will be the default place for people to go. The way that I look at it is it's a little bit like we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, we're inviting Patrick along as well. We see a lot of new opportunities coming to the village as a result of this building, not just sharing out what's existing here already. We see a lot of new groups. For example, we've already been approached, for example, by the group who wants to do these children's events and activity weeks during the week in the summer. So there's lots of things that we can do that will be different to the offering of the Memorial Hall. But again, we are very keen to work with the Memorial Hall wherever possible to mitigate whatever impact that it has on the Memorial Hall. The next thing is the post office and cafe. Yes, we're going to be running a small cafe. It will be pretty basic, to be quite honest with you. It certainly won't be up to Tess and Eddie's standards, or for that matter, those delicious cakes at Time at the Forge. I've had conversations with both groups, and both of them are entirely supportive of what we are producing and have actually wished us good luck and say that they don't see any impact on them at all. In fact, they see the impact being positive because more people might be around the village. The pubs, again, we won't be having a crossover in time with the pubs. We will only be open when there are events. We will not be open as a general rule. It's not going to be, the focus is not about come to the Pavilion Cafe and have a drink. We want to make sure that the focus remains on the three venues that we have in the village, the Sports and Social Club, the Boar and the Crown. And our opening times and the way we operate will be very, very different. So we will ensure that we support them as much as we can. The local residents, we've already talked about the sound. We've talked about the fact that nothing will be happening after 10 o'clock at night. We are aware of traffic, but I'll come to that in a moment. But again, we will be accountable. We have a lease with the council. We will work with the council and local residents to ensure that we are accountable to all local residents and that we respond accordingly. And that's very much, not only is it our desire, but it's actually in our lease as well. Again, there are one or two people who seem to be under the misunderstanding that we're going to stop dog walking. Absolutely, categorically not true. We encourage dog walkers. Of course, we want responsible dog walkers who are going to clean up after them. And we want to work with the dog walking group in the village to see how we can help them and support them to maybe make a better facility, but also to enable that we don't have issues with dog poo and things like that. So we will work with them, and we're very keen as soon as possible to set up a working group with them to see how we can work together. The environment, you've already heard the environmental impact. It will be a carbon neutral building. We will be encouraging people to walk, to car share, to do everything to reduce the amount of people who are actually driving. The great thing is, of course, for 90% of the village, this is completely walkable. Everyone can cycle here. Isn't that great that people aren't going to be using their cars to drive all over the place? This will be a far more sustainable model for our village environment. Parking and traffic, as you can see, we have those 26 spaces. We have planning permission for that already. That's set, we've already got that. But we will do everything that we can to ensure that people drive as little as possible. We're going to be looking at trying to make sure the signage coming into the village, that anybody coming from out of the village will come not through the butts, but around South Street and through Farm Lane. We will do everything that we can, working with the parish council, to make sure that we reduce the traffic impact as much as we possibly can. And finally, our mission is to provide something for Albourne. Anybody booking from Albourne, any of the facilities, will always have priority. We've got already a fee structure so that if you're an Albourne group, if you're an Albourne charity, you'll not only get first dibs, you'll also get the best possible price. Outside, some of you will remember when the football field wasn't available to villagers because it was being used by Swindon football clubs. That will not happen here. We will ensure that Albourne teams, Albourne sports people get first priority. The only time we will allow other groups in will be when everything locally has been exhausted, but we will not be entering into any long-term contracts. We will not do anything that will jeopardise the potential of Albourne people having first priority. Plus, anybody coming from outside the village, if they are a sporting group, they'll pay a certain amount. If they are a corporate group, in other words, it's a business, they will pay even more. So there'll be a very strict structure, so those who are coming out from outside the village, who are a business, they will pay the most, and Albourne groups and charities will pay the least. So we want to make sure that we give absolute priority to everybody in Albourne. What's our timeline? Well, we have our first consultation right now. Of course, this is a desire, not necessarily something we can guarantee. But our next stage, we hope the beginning of next year, that we will draw up final plans based on the feedback that you give us, based on further feedback from the parish council, and a lot of people who aren't here this evening. Again, we encourage you to fill in the questionnaire, which has been on our website now for about 18 months. We've had a lot of respondents already, which have led us to this point. But all of that feedback we will then take into account, and then we will present final plans to the village in this very similar format sometime at the beginning of next year. At that point, we will then apply for planning permission, and then hopefully that won't take too long. It will only take hopefully a few months that we get planning permission. Once we get planning permission, that's the point we really go for funding. Although I should point out, ARC, without the asset of the access track, without the asset of planning permission, and actually without the asset of a lease, we still managed to raise £42,000. So we do have a huge amount of talent and ability to raise money, but once we have the asset of a lease, which we have, once we have the asset of planning permission and a clear programme, then of course it'll be much easier to approach funders. Hopefully break ground sometime in the summer in 2023, and then have the building complete a year later. I'd like to thank, sorry that went a little bit longer than planned, but thank you very much indeed for your attention. We would love to take as many questions as we can. We don't want to keep you too long, but we just want to let you know about how you can be involved and how you can find out more. First of all, I'm sure you're aware of our website. You'll see it as various events. Please do come along and chat to us. We've been attending the Faith the last few years and any other public event that we can, so that we can get people talking to us, which is why we've got so much information already. You'll notice that we have our regular article in the Dapchick. We send out newsletters. And if you'd like to be on the newsletter, if you're not already, there's some forms here that we have to fill, unfortunately, GDPR. So you need to fill out one of those and let us know. We'll make sure that you get our regular newsletters, which will be a bit more regular now that we've got some real momentum. Plus, of course, we're on social media as well, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And then finally, yes, of course, we want to raise money. Tonight is not a fundraising effort by any stretch of the imagination. It's purely to keep you informed. But if you would like to, you can already do something where it won't cost you a penny. It's through Amazon Smile and Easy Fundraising. If you go to the ARC website, on the funding page, you'll see a link to both of these. All you need to do is to sign up, mention ARC, and ARC will get money. We've already raised a few £100s by doing this, and it costs us and it costs you absolutely nothing. It's just part of their charitable works that they do. So if you go on the website, don't worry about remembering it now. If you go on the website, you'll be able to see where it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, all I can say is, again, thank you so much indeed for coming out on this very cold night. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.